Roofs come in all sorts of shapes and varieties, but many buildings have simple flat roofs. So in this movie, I'd like to look at some of the techniques we can use to create a simple flat roof. Now, even a flat roof has some sort of sloping. It's not completely flat. In an early schematic design, you can get away with just doing a flat slab without any slope, and it will be representational enough. But at some point in the design, you're probably going to want to start modeling the actual slope so that you get a more accurate representation of what's really going to be there. So I'm in a file called Flat Roof, and I want to look specifically at the shape editing tools that are available on roof slabs that will allow us to sculpt the drainage sloping for a flat roof. There's kind of a lot of pieces that need to fit together correctly in order for this technique to work. So let's sort of try and walk through this systematically. If I select this roof right here, okay, this is just a pretty typical flat roof. It's called insulation on metal deck, and there's no slope applied to it, as you can see. Compare that to this one. This one's just a generic 9-inch roof. Now, I want you to look right here at the ribbon in particular when I select these. This one obviously has a slope. And I click it, and I get just this single button right here, Edit Footprint. But if I click this one, in addition to Edit Footprint, I also get this Shape Editing panel. So the first thing that has to be in order for you to use the shape editing tools is you have to start with a completely flat roof. You can't even have one edge slope defining. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the way that slope gets applied to a roof using shape editing tools is by points. There's actually 3 methods that you can use to add those points. You can add them individually, point by point. You can add lines where you draw a line and then that actually has 2 points. Or you can actually do pick supports. So, for example, if I just did add a point, you'll see that that takes me into a kind of sketch mode. Now, I should stress that this isn't really the same sketch mode. It does gray out the screen, but it's not really the same kind of mode that we looked at in some of the previous movies. So it really is its own thing. But you can see right here that the plane of the roof highlights in this green dashed line. I'm just going to click a point right there. The green stuff is the stuff that Revit created, and that was created automatically from the shape of the roof. When I add a point, you can see it comes in that bluish color. Now, if I use this tool right here, this is the tool that I need to use to actually change the height of that point. So if I click on it, I can click this little blue point, and it's currently at 0. 0 is measured relative to the plane of the roof. And if I click in that dimension, I can change that to a positive or negative number to move it up or down relative to the roof. So I could put in maybe 4 inches here, and it kind of makes this little pyramidal form. If I add another point maybe over here, modify that sub-element, make that a negative 4 inches. Now you can kind of see these gray lines are sculpting to follow that shape. So if you have a low point here and a high point here, that's kind of what the roof has to do. Now I'm doing sort of a little nonsense example there just to show you what this looks like, but you can see that when I cancel out of the command, I have in fact sculpted the shape of my roof, and it may be easier to see here if I go to a section view. And if we look over here, my roof is now kind of twisted and warped a little bit. Now, if that's the roof I had in mind, I could call it done. But if we investigate this section a little bit more closely, we see a few things that we might want to address. First of all, probably don't want such a weird shaped roof. I'm not really sure if that would be of much benefit. And secondly, you can see that the entire form of the roof is twisting with those points. So there's 2 things I want to show you next. I'm going to select this, and I'm going to actually reset the shape right here. Then I'm going to go back to my 3D view and use my modify sub-elements, and I'm going to take this point at the corner, and I'm going to increase that to about 6 inches, and then this point at the corner. Sometimes you've got to make a little box around it if you can't select it directly, and make that 6 inches as well. So that's a really subtle change in slope that I'm giving it right there. Let me go down here and reopen the section and show you what that did. So now you can see that it's a little more rational. The plane is sloping. Well, a lot of times with this kind of a flat roof, what actually will happen is it's the rigid insulation on top of the roof that's tapered, and the actual structure of the roof remains flat. So if that's the kind of construction that I want to emulate, then I'm going to select this roof object, and I need to do one last thing. And that is edit the type over here on the Properties palette. So I'm going to choose Edit Type. I can duplicate this type if I don't want to modify the one that's here, or I can edit it directly. Just remember, if you edit it directly, it's going to affect every instance of this type throughout the entire model. So sometimes it's a little safer to duplicate it first and give it a unique name. I'll just add the word taper at the end and then edit it. And what we want is this variable column over here on the right. You can make one component in the roof structure variable. So here's my rigid insulation. It's 5-inch thick right now, continuous 5-inch thick. If I check this and click OK, you're going to see that all of the difference in taper gets applied directly to the insulation, and the remaining part of the roof stays flat. So the under edge is flat, and the insulation now is thin on the right and thick on the left. So if you want to accurately represent this flat roof with drainage sloping and tapered rigid insulation, it actually takes this sort of multi-stepped approach. You have to start with a completely flat roof. Then you have to use the shape editing tools to either add points or lines and manipulate where the heights of those points are. And then finally, you have to take your roof type structure and turn on the variable feature next to the rigid insulation component to get the taper to apply just to the rigid insulation.